there.
With what
Is that
resources?
not a...
It's an absurdity. We haven't demonstrated an ability to carpet bomb anything off the face of the earth. First of all, the mere fact that we're talking about carpet bombing means that, immediately we're going to lose the media war. And believe me, we're dealing with a president who's extremely media conscious here. We start carpet bombing out of the blue. We are the war criminals. Does President Obama really want to go down in history as being one of the ultimate war criminals of all time? Because that's what you become when you start carpet bombing. We're no better than the Russians carpet bombing Grozny. Plus, we don't have the resources. How many times this isn't the Taliban. We have free reign over Afghanistan. This is not Iraq, which had no air force. This is Iran, which is preparing for this very eventuality. And it's a huge country. To reach Tehran, to reach Qom, to reach these targets, we have to penetrate deep into Iranian airspace where they have layer after layer after layer of air defense radars and missiles and airplanes that will be vectored in. We're going to suffer significant casualties. People need to wake up. This will not be a cakewalk. If any war is ever, Iraq wasn't a cakewalk, but in comparison to what we got, what we're going to find in taking on Iran, this is altogether the lunacy of thinking we could carpet bomb Iran into submission. I dare say that we will not achieve, basically air superiority over Iran, let alone air supremacy, that it will be contested airspace throughout the conflict, with Iran continuously hitting the military facilities in the region and continuously hitting Israel. And so this is a war that people shouldn't even be contemplating. I believe the Pentagon understands this. There's people in the Pentagon, not the lunatic fringe, but the people in the Pentagon who actually do the planning, who sit there and take a look at the logistics, sustainability requirements, etc., and go, we don't want a piece of this. If this was taking on Nazi Germany, so be it. We pay the price. If this was taking on Imperial Japan, same thing. This is taking on an Iran who threatens nobody. Why we're considering total war with this nation is beyond me.
Well, and are we, that's really, we're kind of begging the question here. How serious of a threat is this? After all, you and I have been talking about why we should not bomb Iran because they're not making nukes, and the whole thing is a lie for 4 or 5 years now, Scott.
Well, it turns out we just barely dodged a bullet under the Bush administration. That all of our discussion about Cheney and everything was dead on accurate. These meetings took place. These discussions were had.
Well, and he brags about that now, that he was pushing for strikes and he was disappointed that Bush didn't do it.
Correct. And one of the reasons why he didn't do it is because the intelligence wasn't there. Ultimately, at the end of the day, they couldn't put the data on the table to sustain the allegations that Iran was pursuing a nuclear weapons capability. And ultimately, I hope that that'll be the same here. I think what we're talking here is more about sanctions than military action. I don't see military action on the horizon, but I do see an effort by the the Obama administration to pursue a harsh regimen of economic sanctions. And again, we come down to the bottom line here. Why? Who are we sanctioning and what are we sanctioning? I don't think the United States is capable of putting forth enforceable sanctions of the scope and scale that would be needed to get Iran to change its behavior. And so we're setting ourselves up for yet another diplomatic failure. And my concern is that if Obama invests so much into sanctions, and the sanctions fail, as they will, the political pressure will be ratcheted up for him to do something presidential. And we have idiots who think they might get away with a surgical strike. Well, what happens in a surgical strike when the Iranians shoot down 50% of the strike force? Or what happens in a surgical strike when we hit and we don't achieve the result that we want to? Now we're left with mud on our face. The world isn't always perfect. You don't always go in and out and the target is destroyed. Iran has been preparing for this for some time now, all eventualities. So now the president says we're going to do a secret nighttime strike, we're going to send in commandos and all this, and next thing you know, you got 50 Americans held prisoner, you got 14 planes shot down, and you got helicopters crashed. Now what, Mr. President? Do we back down? Or do we escalate? This is the kind of situation we just don't need to be getting into here. It's ridiculous to even be discussing it. We should be talking about a diplomatic solution, and Iran's acknowledgement that it has this new facility, opens the door for a diplomatic solution, one which would allow the IAEA, for instance, to say, we need to have, in addition to this declaration, we must have total accountability for all centrifuges. And so bring the centrifuge production capability under monitoring. I mean, this is the direction we should be talking about, not shutting down nuclear enrichment efforts, but rather how do we bring this under control so that we don't have arms control wonks sitting back in their desks in Washington, D.C. and around the country, geeking it over yet another hidden facility. Let's bring the centrifuges under control. Let's talk about a manufacturing accountability so that all centrifuges are known, where they're at, etc., so that there can't be another facility, because we know how many centrifuges there are, we know what they're producing, we know where they're going. This is the discussion that we should be having with Iran on Thursday. Not this, there's nothing to discuss, we're going to, there's only sanctions unless Iran fully submits to our will and ceases enrichment.
I just wanted to really quickly give you a chance, and this is, forgive me, going back to the details of the recent accusations, but I wanted to give you a chance to address the accusation that the only reason it's at the Qom place near the Iranian Revolutionary Guard is obviously that's a military thing, and they're also saying it's so small, this new facility, that it wouldn't be useful for helping with an energy program, but it could be useful in the future someday for cranking out weapons-grade material, that kind of thing. Can you address those two real quick before I let you go, Scott?
Well, again, I mean, ultimately it's up to the Iranians to address it, but I do believe that the Iranians have addressed it. The initial site that's being discussed, or the site that's being discussed, apparently was an ammunition storage facility that the construction was begun sometime in the 1990s, deep earth boring, etc. It wasn't until a few years ago that the Iranians, taking a look at Israel's threat to bomb, the United States' threat to bomb, said, if you hit Natanz, and the bottom line is Natanz can be struck and collapsed and destroyed fairly easily, then they lose a significant investment. So what the Iranians wanted was to maintain a pilot production plan, not only in terms of survivability of the centrifuge enrichment program, but also, I believe you're going to find out that it's probably a test bed for the next generation of Iranian centrifuges. And so they're going to build something that allows the survivability of their enrichment program, the viability of their enrichment program. It's strategic depth. When this hole in the ground was not originally part of the military facility, I believe, it's only when they decided to make it part of the enrichment, part of the nuclear effort, that you saw an expansion of it. And as the Iranian ambassador said, we did this because we understand the risk that our nuclear programs are under, and we did not want to put in a completely new air defense system that basically, by placing this enrichment facility where it is, the bottom line is it'll be protected by the existing air defense capabilities of the Iranian military site. And the final thing is, it's a technology test bed. That's what a pilot plant is. It's not meant for commercial scale production, and the Iranians aren't trying to disguise it as such. It's about technology verification and technology continuation in case they lose the original site. Can it be used for producing nuclear weapons? No, because in order to do that, you would have to divert nuclear material. I believe one of the wonks is talking about diverting, uranium hexafluoride feedstocks that would constitute, upwards of 16, maybe 20% of the total stocks available to Iran. Do you think they're going to do that kind of diversion and not get detected?
No.
Of course they would be detected. So the bottom line is, it's absurd in the extreme to talk about this facility as a nuclear weapons facility, because at the end of the day, there is no diversion of nuclear material, and that's ultimately what this debate should be about.
All right, Scott, I really appreciate your time. We got to leave it. All right, so basically, let's get right to it. Last week, the IAEA, I believe on Monday, was notified by the Iranians that they have a facility that they're building that's going to